We are no longer in the standard era of lawfare. We have entered full-blown Soviet-level lawfare
on steroids.
Viva Frei, former Montreal litigator turned rumbler, and yes, I'm sure everyone on earth has heard the news of the day, the news of the week, the news that has left the left in orgiastic ecstasy. Donald John Trump was found by a jury to be liable for sexual battery and defamation in a lawsuit filed by one Jean Carroll, Jean Carroll against Donald Trump, resulting from alleged events that allegedly occurred sometime in the 90s. Jean Carroll didn't really have any dates specified in her memory. Carroll sued Trump civilly for rape and for defamation resulting from Donald Trump denying the rape had occurred, calling her a con job, all sorts of names. She sued for rape and for defamation, despite the statute of limitations having been long exceeded as relates for any potential criminal claim, and there was some attenuating circumstances of some legislation that expanded the statute of limitations for civil claims, and she had a 1-year window of opportunity to file a civil claim, and she exercised that right to avail herself of that extension. She sued Donald Trump in New York. She had a trial. For anyone who had watched the trial, you would be equally outraged by this jury finding, unless you're a partisan hack, and there seem to be a lot of partisan hacks all over social media. But the verdict came down yesterday. The jury rendered a finding of liability, not on the rape and defamation, because the jury did not believe Carroll's story as relates to the alleged rape. They found Donald Trump liable for sexual assault, sexual battery, the lesser version of rape, and the defamation resulting from his denial of the event and calling Carroll all sorts of names, a con artist, trying to sell her book in which she detailed these events. I'm watching people's reactions online, and I've got to tell you, lawfare. It's lawfare to the next level. They have seen now that lawfare is not only useful in destroying people through the process. Get the right venue. You can destroy people through the verdict or through the jury findings. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with Carroll's story, I'm going to play you a clip from an interview that she gave on CNN almost 4 years ago with Anderson Cooper. If you haven't seen this interview, you might find it a little shocking. If you have seen this interview, you might find it a little shocking that a certain portion of this interview, in which Carroll looked like nothing less than an absolute crazy person, had been edited out from the version that CNN and Anderson Cooper put on YouTube. Because if you go watch the interview on YouTube, you're going to find a certain portion of it is acutely missing. And I'll start with the portion that is acutely missing from what you might see on YouTube today.
You don't feel like a victim?
I was not thrown on the ground and ravished. Which the word rape carries so many sexual connotations. This was not sexual. It hurt.
Well, I think most people think of rape as it is a violent assault. It is not.
I think most people think of rape as being sexy.
What?
Let's take a short break.
Think of the fantasies.
Let's take a break.
We're going to take a quick break.
Yeah, cut it.
If you can stick around, we'll talk more on the
Cut
other
it.
side.
You're fascinating to talk to.
Cut it. That is the portion of the interview that you will find acutely, oddly, conveniently missing from Anderson Cooper's interview that is currently on YouTube on CNN's channel. But I'll play you a portion from the interview that is still on YouTube so you can get the details of this story as it happened in the mind of Carroll.
And so we went up the escalator. We went to the lingerie department. It was empty. There was nobody there. There was nobody on the whole floor, frankly. I think you go through bathing suits and cruisewear, and the store was not populated at the time. Nobody was there on the counter.
That's going to sound strange to people that nobody was in the...
Because Bergdorf's is the greatest store on the earth. They take care of whatever you want, they're there. Mm-hmm. If you're thirsty, they'll bring you water, they'll get you whatever, they'll call all over the country to get whatever you want. It was a moment in time, nobody was there. Plus, a dressing room door was open, which is very unusual because usually they're locked, and the attendant comes and locks it, escorts you in, etc. Okay.
So as you can see from the version of events as detailed by Carroll during the CNN interview, according to her, she was leaving the Bergdorf, some fancy store in New York, while Donald John Trump was entering the Bergdorf. He said, "Hey, I recognize you." She said, "I recognize you." Don Trump said, "I need to get a gift for a woman. Will you help me?" And she was ecstatic. She's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll show you around." They walked around the Bergdorf. Apparently, Donald Trump was unnoticed, despite being a billionaire tycoon in one of the fanciest stores in the world. They were in this store walking around, and although this store is usually very busy, As magic would have it, the floor that they were on, which they got to magically unnoticed without any security guards for Donald Trump, without any store clerks jumping on Donald Trump to get him to buy the fanciest, the most expensive stuff there. They magically walked through this store unnoticed. They get to a floor where magically there's no one there. On this floor where magically there's no one there, there happened to be magically a changing room that was magically unlocked, because typically, as she said during her interview, those doors are typically locked. Someone comes in with a key and lets you. The door was unlocked. Donald Trump went in there with her, forced himself upon her, and allegedly raped her. And she used the word raped her in the interview with Anderson Cooper.
You're saying there was actual penetration?
Yes.
Did you, which puts it into a different category of any of the other women who have come forward. I think that is the definition of rape. One definition.
That's the definition. Yes.
The event occurred, she allegedly hit her head so hard that one of her friends who she called afterwards was concerned about her health, but she hit her head. No police report filed, no medical report, no nothing. She then allegedly calls her friend afterwards, tells her friend what happened. Her friend says, it sounds like you were just raped and you might have hit your head and you might need medical attention. And apparently Carroll said, no, don't call the cops, don't call the police, nothing, and let us never speak of this again. And they never spoke of it again until 2016. What happened in 2016? I'll let your imaginations run wild. For those of you who were not following the trial, the jury finding might not be so shocking because you might not fully appreciate the dearth of the evidence that was submitted, the weakness of the evidence that was submitted. For those of us who were following the trial in any meaningful detail, it is an objective, abject aberration of justice, despite what the talking heads out there like David A. French would have you believe. The evidence that this event occurred, Carroll's testimony. She couldn't remember a date. She couldn't remember really a year even. Carroll's testimony and that of her friend who remembers having received a call after the event from her friend telling her what happened, but none of them called the police, none of them called the doctor, and they never spoke of it for about another 30 years. That was pretty much the evidence adduced at trial. That and some other friends who remembered her talking about it at the time, but doing nothing about it at the time or for the next 3 decades. Apparently there was a Bergdorf employee, a former Bergdorf employee, who testified that the store was dead silent on a Thursday afternoon. And I've got to tell you, for anyone who has ever worked in retail, and I've worked in retail, Thursday evenings are the busiest, best evenings for shopping and for working as a clerk, especially if you are on, what's that word? Commission. If you work on commission, you wanted to work Thursday nights and Friday nights because that's when stores were typically open longer, and that's when people who had been working all day came out at night to shop and to spend money, which, if you worked on commission, was a good thing for the employee. But no, according to this former Bergdorf employee, Thursday evening the store was so dead silent that a billionaire tycoon could walk around unsolicited, unbothered, no security, could find his way into a changing room that was magically unlocked. The thing sounds as fantastical as it sounds. The only thing more absurd than the story as described by Carroll on CNN to Anderson Cooper is that a jury unanimously found Donald Trump liable for the events. Actually, I should say the alleged events, but now, technically speaking, in law, these events are legal facts. Donald Trump is legally liable for the events and for the defamation that ensued. But if this dearth of evidence does not shock the conscience given the jury finding, I should add that there was, in fact, other evidence adduced, and that was evidence of character of Donald Trump, because they had 2 other people, 2 other women come in and say how Donald Trump allegedly assaulted them as well at some point in the past. One of them alleges that Donald Trump assaulted her on an airplane in the 70s when she was invited into first class by Donald Trump, and she took the last remaining open seat in first class, and Donald Trump jumped all over her very aggressively, as though he had 40 zillion hands apparently, and he assaulted her in first class on an airplane, and nobody saw anything, nobody said anything, and she also said nothing for decades. And what is the connection between these allegations that allegedly occurred in the 70s and Carroll's lawsuit? None at all, except to prove some form of character of Donald Trump, that this is his modus operandi, this is what he does, this is what he's done to other women. Except these other women did not go to the police either, did not file criminal complaints, did not file civil complaints. There was no adjudication on these allegations in and of themselves, and yet somehow there was a mini trial within a trial bringing in these witnesses who were testifying on untested, unconfirmed allegations as though they were fact, as though they were provable fact, to determine this is how Donald Trump operates. And it works so well that you have some lawyers like the David A. Frenches of this world who said, oh my goodness, they brought in these other witnesses who confirmed that Donald Trump also assaulted them, failing to distinguish between allegations of assault and actual evidence of assault. Another witness also testified as to Donald Trump's alleged modus operandi, alleging that he also aggressively accosted her at some point. She also said nothing about it. They call in these two witnesses to testify on their own experience that had not been the object of any civil or criminal complaint, any objective finding. They brought them in. This evidence should never have been brought in, because when you talk about evidence having more prejudicial value than probative value, this is exactly what they mean. Bringing in these two witnesses to testify about what allegedly happened to them decades earlier was nothing more than having an unsubstantiated trial within a trial in an attempt to substantiate the allegations in this trial. Totally inappropriate. But my goodness, the damage is done. Even if there is somehow some form of successful appeal to this, nothing will change the headlines that many people are running with today. And those headlines are confounding civil liability with criminal wrongdoing. The amount of people on social media, the blue checkmark talking head types who are conflating criminal conviction with civil liability, there's a lot of them, and it cannot be an accident. People using the words like found guilty, which is not a word you use in cases of civil liability, convicted, calling him a convicted sexual predator. It's out there. They're running with it, and they are falsely creating the illusion that Donald Trump was criminally convicted, which is proven beyond a reasonable doubt, as opposed to found civilly liable, which is according to the preponderance of the evidence. And my goodness, even though there's that lesser standard in civil liability cases, I do not think Carroll came anywhere near proving it in this case. Call me biased, call me whatever you want. I actually followed the trial. It's absurd. The expression used to be that in Chicago you could indict a ham sandwich. Well, my goodness, they're going to have to change that expression to in New York they can convict a ham sandwich. Except I guess in this case they're going to have to say that in New York you could convict an orange.
Hey, Pear! Oh, God.
Some people are rightly asking, how is it that the jury came to a finding of civil liability when they did not believe that Carroll was raped? Well, I will steelman that argument for everybody out there, because I always steelman the opposing argument. The jury could very easily say that we did not think there was preponderance of the evidence in terms of whether or not she was raped. Something happened in there. Was it full penetration? We don't know. Carroll doesn't remember. It's unclear. So we can't find on the rape aspect, but we can find on the sexual battery, sexual assault aspect. And then we conclude that there was defamation because Donald Trump denied having done something that we didn't find that he did. That is the steelman. Donald Trump denied having done something that we said he did in one form or another. He denied having raped her. He denied having done any sort of sexual battery on her. We found that he did sexual battery on her. Therefore, we find him civilly liable for that and civilly liable for the defamation resulting from that, and award her $5 million. It's just pennies in the jar for Donald Trump. But my goodness, it gives them the headlines for the next 2 years. Oh, what's happening in about a year and a half? Oh yeah, that's right. Presidential elections. Now, some of you out there might call me a biased political hack. Nothing I can do about that. I followed this trial. This trial was a sham, and the outcome of this trial should shock the conscience of everybody, regardless of how much you hate Donald Trump, regardless of how much you want him behind bars. This is a terrible precedent, although it's a wonderful precedent if you hate Donald Trump. It's a terrible precedent for the system of justice as a whole, because the evidence was simply not there. There was a clear abuse in terms of what was allowed to be presented to the jury as relates to the character assassination of Donald Trump, and what was not allowed to be presented to the jury as relates to potentially equally damning stuff as relates to Carroll. I don't know, maybe the fact that she had accused men of similar things in the past. Maybe about the billionaire, highly politically active individual who was bankrolling Carroll's lawsuit. That might have been somewhat relevant, as relates to questioning the credibility of Carroll. But it seems that the only highly prejudicial and not so probative evidence came in against Trump, and all that could have called into question Carroll's credibility, who was funding this lawsuit, that wasn't allowed for reasons unknown. Reasons were known. Orange man, bad. And the worst thing that the outcome of this trial is going to have, as far as I am concerned, in my humble opinion, is the negative impact it's going to have on actual victims. Because yes, I do not believe Carroll. I believe she either made this up, something else happened. I have no idea. I believe that this did not happen, and that Donald Trump was not defaming her by calling her a nut job and whatever, a con job, in trying to sell her book detailing these events. I believe Donald Trump. The evidence was simply not there for anyone who followed it. But the worst thing about this is it's going to actually harm actual victims who might be reluctant to come forward now because they see how the system is being weaponized, to the point where other people out there are going to question them for coming forward, because you have people like Carroll abusing of the system, abusing of the politics of the jury pool in order to get a condemnation, in order to get a jury finding of civil liability. This is going to hurt everybody, and the only people who don't care are the people who want to weaponize this politically, because it's party over country. It is politics, politics, politics. It is about gaining power, seizing power, retaining that power, and then weaponizing that power so that you never lose power again. So that's it. I'm losing light. I'm losing battery power. The outcome of this trial is an absolute joke. The trial itself was a sham. The system itself is broken. This is going to set the precedent now for the conviction that is going to come in Alvin Bragg's criminal prosecution of Donald Trump in New York. It's going to lay the groundwork for an indictment in Georgia on the election issues. This is how systems get weaponized, abused, exploited, and absolutely destroy everything. Or maybe I'm being hyperbolic and Donald Trump is actually guilty as hell of everything. He's the worst person on earth and he's finally getting his just comeuppance. I prefer my assessment. Now, if you like my videos and like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below. If you want to support the channel, go to Viva Frei, get some merch, vivabarneslaw.locals.com if you want to support my work with Robert Barnes. But more important than anything, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well, and now you know you vlog. Peace out. Booyah!